He just wanted a coffee. But when he heard the waitress speaking to tourists in 10 different languages with precision, patience, and a tired spark in her eyes, something inside him stopped. It was just past 9 a.m. at a tucked-away cafe near Boston's Quincy Market. William Haynes, freshly shaved, suit slightly rumpled, sat at a corner table with a black coffee and no real reason to be there. He wasn't due at any boardroom or charity gala. He was just drifting, as he'd done most mornings since Linda passed. But the woman taking orders behind the counter, she was anything but drifting. Elise moved through the dining room like someone with no time to waste. One moment she was calming an older French couple struggling with the menu. Next, she seamlessly shifted to Mandarin, explaining vegetarian options to a group of Chinese students. Then came Italian, Portuguese, German, and that was just before she refilled William's cup. Her voice was gentle, her corrections subtle, and despite her exhaustion, she smiled like every conversation mattered. William watched, his coffee cooling. He had made billion-dollar deals, built companies from nothing. But in that moment, watching a waitress speak to the world one table at a time, he felt smaller than he had in years. And then, he stood up. That what he did next would change her life and his, in ways neither of them could imagine. Within 72 hours, their story would make headlines across 4 continents. Elise Carter arrived at Caf Melrose every morning by 6:30. Rain, snow, or shine, and in Boston, that meant real snow. She wore her same navy blue sneakers with the soles peeling, her apron folded neatly in her bag, and her hair pulled into a practical bun that framed the lines near her eyes. At 42, Elise had a calm way about her, the kind that comes not from peace, but from surviving enough chaos to know how to fake it. She took the early shift not because she was a morning person, but because it left her evenings free for the library. Not to read, those days were long gone, but to reshelve books and lead the occasional ESL class when her manager let her. She didn't complain. Tips were better in the morning anyway, when tourists rolled in wide-eyed with city maps and questions, grateful for help. That was when Elise came alive, just a little dot to the regulars. She was just the multilingual waitress. They'd smile when she switched to Dutch or Japanese mid-order, like it was magic. Some left extra for the novelty. Others asked, "Why aren't you teaching at Harvard?" She'd laugh, the same tight smile, and say, "Life's a detour, isn't it?" Then she'd wipe the table and move on. But Elise carried secrets. Her apartment in Dorchester was small, barely heated, and stuffed with language books she couldn't part with. She had a framed photo of her graduation day at the University of Chicago Linguistics, summa cum laude, tucked in a drawer she never opened. Her sister used to call her the walking Rosetta Stone. Her mother used to say she was born speaking, not crying. And yet, here she was, memorizing sandwich orders and calculating if her tips could cover next month's rent. As she slid a latte across the counter to a couple from Brazil, replying in smooth Portuguese, Elise felt the familiar ache behind her eyes. Not just fatigue, the kind of ache that came from knowing you were built for something else, and no longer believing you'd ever get back there. She turned to refill another cup, unaware that the man in the corner, the one in the navy blazer with the quiet eyes, hadn't touched his coffee in 10 minutes, and he was watching her, like she was the last unsolved puzzle of his life. William Haynes hadn't planned to be in Boston that week. The original agenda had included a flight to Zurich, a board meeting in London, and maybe a few days at his vineyard in Sonoma. But instead, he found himself wandering Beacon Hill, eating alone, and now, inexplicably, sipping lukewarm coffee in a cafe that smelled of cinnamon and window cleaner. At 58, William had the kind of wealth that made problems disappear. Lawyers, doctors, even silence could be bought, but not sleep, not peace, and certainly not purpose. Those had left him 4 years ago, when Linda, his wife of 3 decades, lost her battle with ovarian cancer. She had been the soul behind his success, the one who made him human. Without her, everything felt mechanical. Meetings, mergers, even laughter, especially laughter. He wasn't used to noticing people anymore. He had assistants for that, but Elise had frozen him in place. It wasn't just her command of languages, although that was impressive. It was how she spoke to people, how she adjusted her tone for each culture, how her body leaned in when others would pull back. She reminded him of something he couldn't name, some echo of grace or hope he hadn't felt since Linda's final lucid day, when she'd whispered in Italian, their honeymoon language, "Torna alla vita, Will, promise me. Come back to life. William had broken that promise, until now. He watched Elise float between tables like a symphony conductor. No clipboard, no hesitation. There was power in her presence, but no pride. And the more he looked, the more he saw it. Not just exhaustion, but restraint. Like a lion in a birdcage, when she dropped a spoon and muttered something in Arabic under her breath. He almost laughed, the reflex of a man not used to surprises. Then she glanced up, caught his eyes, and for a split second, something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Not that they'd met before, but that they were both pretending to be smaller than they were. William blinked. The spoon clattered. Elise bent down to pick it up, and in that tiny, unremarkable moment, William Haynes made a decision. He would speak to her, and not like a millionaire. Like a man who'd just woken up from a long, long sleep. William waited until the morning rush thinned out. Elise had just cleared the table beside his when he spoke, casually, almost like a question he asked strangers every day. You speak 10 languages? Elise looked up. Her first instinct was guardedness. Questions like that usually led to assumptions, or, worse, offers she'd learned to dodge. Maybe 11, she said with a tired smile. Depends on your definition of fluent. William grinned. I'm impressed. She nodded politely, ready to move on. But something about his tone made her pause. He wasn't just being charming, he was listening, with intent. Can I ask, he continued, what's a woman like you doing here? I mean, with those skills, that did it. The smile disappeared. She stepped back slightly, holding the tray to her chest like a shield. Same thing you're doing here, she replied, softly. Getting through the day. William respected the edge in her voice. He'd been spoken to like that before, mostly by people who'd been burned. I didn't mean to pry. He hesitated, unsure of his own words. You remind me of someone I lost. She was ... brilliant, and tired, just like you. The air between them shifted. Elise set the tray down. I'm sorry, she said, that you lost someone. William nodded. It wasn't an awkward moment. It was quiet, intimate. The kind of pause where two people consider saying something true. I taught once, Elise added, almost too quietly. Languages, mostly. But that feels like a lifetime ago. Why'd you stop? A long silence. Because sometimes, life reroutes you, she said, and you forget what you were built for. William leaned back in his chair, unsettled. He'd built his entire empire around logic, predictability, scale, but there was something raw in Elise's honesty, something no algorithm could decode. He watched her return to the counter, her back impossibly straight. He didn't know it yet, but her answer would keep him up that night, not because it was sad, but because he understood it far too well. Elise wasn't used to people circling back. Most customers came, marveled at her language skills, and left. But the man in the corner, William, returned the next morning. Same seat. Same quiet demeanor. Same eyes that looked like they were trying to solve her. He didn't ask many questions at first, just ordered coffee, left a generous tip, and watched. By the third morning, he asked if she'd ever lived abroad. She nodded. A few years in Geneva, 2 in Rio, teaching contracts, mostly. She didn't mention the offer from Oxford, or the conference in Paris where she once stood on stage translating for speakers in real time. That Elise didn't exist anymore. She couldn't afford to. William never pushed. He just showed up, day after day. And slowly, Elise found herself speaking more about small things at first. Her favorite Arabic poet, the rhythm of Korean grammar, the humor in Russian slang. When she spoke about languages, her whole face lit up in a way that startled even her. But then she'd catch herself, clamp down, return to neutral. On Friday, as she wiped down a booth, William asked, "Why did you really stop teaching?" She froze, mid-swipe. Elise didn't lie. Not exactly. She just layered half-truths over silence. Burnout, she said. Universities don't pay much. Grants dry up, and I needed something stable. William studied her. He could tell she was skimming the surface of a deeper ocean. You ever miss it? Elise didn't answer right away. She turned toward the window, eyes tracking a group of tourists laughing in the street. Sometimes, she said, when I dream in languages I haven't used in years, when I hear someone mispronounce something and my fingers twitch to correct them. William smiled softly. That's not burnout. That's grief. Her eyes snapped back to his. The word hit too close. She started to say something but stopped. Her throat tightened. "I should get back," she muttered, retreating behind the counter. But in that split-second exchange, the look, the word, the pause, William saw it. Not just talent, not just exhaustion. He saw brilliance, caged, and something inside him, dormant for too long, began to stir. It wasn't in William's nature to follow people. But the next afternoon, after Elise mentioned needing to get to the library, curiosity overrode decorum. He waited a few minutes, then quietly followed her cab down Franklin Street. Unsure what he hoped to find, the building was modest: red brick, chipped stone steps, and a carved wooden sign that read Franklin Branch Library. Inside, it smelled of paper, dust, and old ambition. He watched from the glass entrance as Elise removed her coat, waved to a young staffer, and disappeared behind the circulation desk. William stepped inside, staying discreet. He wasn't stalking her, not exactly. He told himself he just wanted context. But as he wandered through the aisles, something struck him: the ease with which Elise moved in this place, like it remembered her, and she remembered it. He finally saw her again, in the back room, helping a nervous teenage boy practice an English sentence. She corrected him gently, switching between Spanish and English with such fluidity that William felt embarrassed to only speak one language. The boy laughed, trying again, more confident this time. Elise nodded, pleased. She didn't see William until the boy left. "I'm not sure whether to be flattered or concerned," she said, stepping into the doorway, arms folded but not cold. "I had to know," William admitted. "Where someone like you goes after waiting tables," she sighed. "It's not glamorous." "No," he said, "it's more important." She tilted her head, caught off guard. "I used to teach night classes here," she said, "before budget cuts. Now I volunteer. A few ESL sessions, help with translation needs, literacy programs, keeps me from rusting." William walked closer, glancing around. "You were born to teach." Elise looked down. "I thought so, once." He stepped lightly, cautious not to press too hard. "You still could. Bigger scale, bigger reach." She gave a bitter smile. "That ship sailed a long time ago." "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe it's just docked somewhere else, waiting." Something flickered behind her eyes. Not belief, not yet, but the faint memory of what belief felt like. William left the library an hour later with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear: Elise hadn't lost her gift. She'd just been surviving in silence, waiting for someone to notice the sound. William wasn't the kind of man who gave up. Not in business, and not now, not with Elise. He needed to understand why someone with her mind, her presence, had vanished from academia without a trace. Not one lecture clip online. Not a single recent publication. It was like she'd erased herself. So, he made a call. A former colleague from his philanthropy board connected him with a linguistics professor at Boston University. Someone who, coincidentally, remembered Elise Carter. "Oh, she was a rising star," the professor said over coffee. "Fluent in a dozen tongues, published early, spoke at conferences in Europe before she was 30. Everyone assumed she'd land at MIT or go international." "What happened?" William asked. The professor hesitated, glanced around. "There was an incident. A student accused her of academic dishonesty, said she falsified parts of a grant proposal to get funding. It went public fast. Elise denied it, of course. But the university opened an investigation. And no charges. No official record. But the damage was done. Sponsors pulled back. Schools got nervous. She disappeared after that. It was a mess, but honestly, I always felt like there was more to the story. She wasn't the type to cut corners." William sat back, heart heavy. It wasn't guilt that had derailed Elise's life. It was suspicion, the kind that sticks, even after it's proven wrong. And worse, no one had stood up for her. She'd been brilliant, young, and alone. Easy to target, easier to forget. Back at the cafe the next morning, William looked at Elise differently. She joked with a family from Denmark, asked a boy in Mandarin if he liked his pancakes, and laughed, really laughed, when a woman mispronounced quiche. But behind it all, William saw it now. The armor, the fear of being seen. He waited until her break and asked softly, "What happened at the university?" She froze. Her tray shook slightly. "I was accused of something I didn't do," she whispered, "and I didn't fight hard enough to prove it. I was exhausted. Alone. I thought maybe I deserved to disappear. William shook his head slowly. You didn't. She looked away. It doesn't matter anymore. But he leaned forward. It does, because you're still here, and you still matter. For the first time, Elise didn't deflect. She just sat there, quiet, letting herself be seen. The following Monday, William arrived at Caf Melrose with a different energy. He wore a darker suit, no tie, and a spark in his eyes that hadn't been there in years. Elise noticed it instantly. The shift. He looked purposeful. She brought him his usual coffee, but before she could walk away, he spoke. I want to show you something. Elise blinked. What kind of something? Just give me 20 minutes after your shift. No pressure. Just a conversation. Against her better judgment, she agreed. Later that afternoon, she found herself sitting in the passenger seat of a black Tesla, headed toward the Seaport district. The waterfront shimmered in the late sun as William pulled into a gated tech campus. She followed him through glass doors and down a hallway lined with whiteboards and world maps. They stopped at a quiet office, modern, minimalist, overlooking the harbor. This, he said, is the Boston Innovation Lab. One of my projects. We fund education models that don't exist yet. She folded her arms, skeptical. Why are you showing me this? William turned to face her. Because I want to build something with you. She stared. I'm launching a global language initiative, a digital platform, schools, refugees, communities with no access to language training, but I don't want software developers running it. I want someone who's lived it, who understands what language really is, not just structure, but connection. Her heart pounded. I want you to lead it, he said. Design the curriculum, build the team, create a space where none of your past can disqualify you. Elise almost laughed. You're offering me the job of a lifetime. Because I served you coffee. William smiled. No, because I saw you speak 10 languages with fluency, grace, and empathy. Because I know the world missed its chance with you once, and I don't want to let it happen again. She stepped back. You don't know me. I know enough, he said gently. And I believe in second chapters. Elise didn't speak for a long time. She stared at the skyline, jaw tight, eyes glassy. I'd have to think about it, she said finally. Of course, William replied. But I hope you say yes. The world needs your voice. She nodded once, then left the wind catching her coat as she stepped outside and her pocket. She gripped her apartment key and something else. The sudden, terrifying hope that maybe her story wasn't over yet. Elise didn't sleep much that night. She lay on her worn couch, the city murmuring outside her window, replaying William's words again and again. Her apartment felt smaller than usual, the stacks of old books more like anchors than comfort. The fear wasn't about failure. It was about being seen again, about stepping into the light with nothing but her truth. But the next morning, Elise walked into Caf Melrose with her chin slightly higher. She tied her apron one last time, took a deep breath, and walked over to William's table before the coffee even cooled. I'm in, she said, but on one condition. He looked up, surprised but calm. What's that? I don't want to be a symbol, she said, or a redemption story. I just want to do the work. For the people who never get the chance. William smiled. Then, let's begin. Within a week, Elise submitted her resignation. The cafe owner hugged her with tears in her eyes. Word traveled fast. Some of her students at the library cried, but Elise didn't flinch. She was already drafting curriculum outlines and interviewing linguists from Nairobi to Sao Paulo. And then, someone leaked the story, an anonymous post, titled The Waitress Who Spoke 10 Languages, and The Billionaire Who Finally Listened, went viral within hours. Within a day, NPR called, then The New York Times, then BBC World. Journalists were obsessed with the juxtaposition. A waitress, with a PhD, a man with millions, a second chance that somehow felt earned, not gifted. Elise hated the attention. But when CNN asked if she'd speak at a live education summit in New York, William urged her gently. Not for them, he said. For the girls out there watching, thinking it's too late. Elise agreed. The night of the summit, she stood backstage, palms damp, heart racing. She had never worn heels this expensive or stood under lights this harsh. But when the announcer said her name and she stepped forward, the applause rose like a wave. She spoke for 20 minutes in English, yes, but with brief passages in French, Arabic, Japanese, and Swahili woven throughout. She talked about access, about dignity, about what it means to carry a gift no one wants to see. And the crowd didn't just listen. They stood. They cried. Elise Carter had returned to the world, but this time, on her terms. 3 months later, Elise stood on a stage in Geneva, the city where, years ago, her teaching career had quietly imploded. Now, she was back. But this time, not as someone hiding from a past. She was the keynote speaker at the International Language Equity Conference, headlining a panel of policymakers, educators, and tech leaders. Her photo was on banners lining the street outside. Backstage, she paced slowly, heels clicking against marble. William sat nearby, relaxed but alert, watching her the way someone watches fire, with awe and a little caution. "You ready?" he asked. Elise exhaled. "Ready as I'll ever be." The lights went up. The applause was polite, then grew scattered at first, then unified. Not for her resume, not for the headlines, for something more personal, her presence. She began in English, her voice calm, strong. "Language is not just words," she said. "It's survival, it's connection, it's dignity." Then, like a ripple of wind catching sails, she shifted: Spanish, Swahili, Korean, German, Urdu, and more. Each transition seamless. Each sentence, simple, human, personal. She shared stories from refugee camps in Jordan, from underfunded schools in rural Texas, from cafe tables in Boston where connection often came without translation. She spoke not like an expert, but like someone who had lost something and fought her way back to it. When she finished, the room stood, not out of politeness, but reverence. After the speech, a young woman in tears approached her. "I watched your interview," she said. "I dropped out of school last year, but now, I think I want to go back." Elise touched her hand gently. "Then do. It's never too late to change your story." That night, alone in her hotel room, Elise opened a small box she'd kept tucked in her luggage. Inside was the old university name badge she once hid after the scandal. She turned it over in her hand, then set it beside her laptop. She didn't need to erase her past anymore. It had brought her here, and now, finally, she was speaking every language she ever knew, including the one no one could take from her, the one called hope. If this story touched your heart, don't leave without subscribing. Where in the world are you watching from? And what part of Elise's journey stayed with you the most? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Your voice matters. Here,